welcome to the podcast. I'm Karen Weaver. Before we get started with our interview today, I wanted to tell you that I have yet to see in one place a compilation of the many headwinds that those of us in higher education are facing today. So in the spirit of we can't fix the problem if we don't know all the solutions and all the issues, I thought I'd try to list the storms already here, the ones that are emerging, and some bold solutions that college athletics and higher education might pursue as we try to move on from this pandemic. So before the coronavirus world, there were signals that all was not well in college athletics. Number one, and most importantly, the accelerated growth in coaching salaries, support staffs, and facility spending and building. There was a second one in that football programs at mid-sized to smaller schools were starting to be dropped. Schools like Jacksonville University, St. Cloud State University, the University of Minnesota Crookston, all just this fall. Attendance at big-time college football and basketball games continues to decline over the last decade. There's also a declining number of high school graduates beginning this year and extending for the next 10 years. Almost 3 million students are enrolled in college in 2019 than in 2011. There's also a decline in the full pay international students, and that has been trending downward for several years. There's continued pressure to reduce total cost to families, that is student debt, and that is becoming more and more of a factor in how students choose their colleges. The changing national demographics favoring institutions located in the South and the West and disproportionately impacting schools located in the Northeast and the Midwest parts of the country. And finally, the continued court battles involving the definition of amateurism, concussions, and other battles threatening to upend the current NCAA governance models. The storms that are here right now include, as of today, NCAA medical doctors are advising athletes not to work out in pairs and not to touch a shared ball until the risk of transmission is over and we are out of this pandemic. We know that the NCAA's fiscal year 2020 revenue distributions for spring dropped by 62%. Campuses are in the process of deciding whether refunds or credits to students will be given for housing and dining that they didn't take advantage of in the spring because of being forced to evacuate campuses. The National Association of College Admissions Counselors withdrew from a battle with the Department of Justice in the fall of 2019 over their long-established agreed-upon regulations over early decisions, as well as consistency, creating a standard across all colleges regarding deadlines, terminology, and procedures, causing further upheaval in the college admission space. In effect, you're no longer committed to a college when you make that paid deposit on May 1st or June 1st. Colleges can still recruit you beyond that space. We know that for the majority of colleges, cash on hand is low, and we're keeping an eye on, but schools and athletic programs are closing or dropping, or in one case, staff was being furloughed. So just before the pandemic was upon us, I had the chance to visit with Dr. Linda Oubre. As I've looked at the challenges facing higher ed, I have found Dr. Oubre's laser focus on her school's mission to be representative of how small colleges can move ahead in this fast-changing environment. Consider this. She is a former business school dean and the first person of color to lead Whittier College. She is the former CEO and once worked for the Walt Disney Companies. In this era of revolution, listen to how she is positioning her institution to survive the current storm. Here now is my interview with Dr. Linda Oubre, president at Whittier College. So I'm joined today by Linda Oubre, who is the relatively new president at Whittier College. And Linda, this is your first presidency, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so tell me about your thoughts about being a first-time president.
You know what? It's a lot of common sense. Especially I moved from being a dean at a large public institution with 6,000 students just in the College of Business to a very small 1,700 plus campus. And so a lot of the job is very much the same. and it's all about the students.
Tell us a little bit about Whittier. What kinds of students, how big of a population, size of athletics program, that type of thing.
So we are Division III athletics. We have about 1750, 1760 students.
Okay.
I'd say majority are undergraduate. We only have one graduate program,
Okay.
so mostly undergraduates. We are best known as being Richard Nixon's alma mater.
Right. That's right.
But we are very different than when Richard Nixon went to school then was president.
Right.
The college has changed a lot as the demographics of Southern California have changed. We're traditional, founded by Quakers, but haven't been Quakers since 1940, but still really carry the Quaker philosophy in terms of there's light in everyone, social justice, every human being is important, we're liberal arts. We are now, though, a Hispanic serving institution, and Anna Peasy schools, who are a minority serving institution, with over 70% students of color, and about 40% first in their families to go to college.
Okay.
And so we look like Southern California.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell us what an Anna Peasy student is.
Anna Peasy is basically, it's Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, and I probably said those initials in the wrong order.
That's okay, but that helps our listeners understand
Yes,
what that means.
yes.
Of that percentage of undergraduates, about what percentage plays athletics?
About 35%.
35%.
So we're just over a third are athletes.
So they're an important part of your overall population and your overall recruitment and retention strategy.
Very
I would
much
think.
so.
Yeah,
Very much so.
absolutely. So how much involvement have you had with your athletic conference and NCAA governance since you became president, and how much of a learning curve was it?
Well, I took your class, and your class was very helpful. It's interesting because I tell people coming into the job, even though it's very much like being a business dean, the one thing I did not have was athletics. Everything else I had managed before, and so that was the new piece. On top of that, my athletic director quit before I showed up. I took a Division II job, so
Wow.
between the time I was announced and when I came, he left. And I was a little nervous at first because I don't officially know and haven't managed athletics.
Right.
But I've been blessed. I did a search, I did a national search, and landed on the senior associate athletic director who's been on campus for 30 years.
Wow.
And started as a student and a basketball player, and then longtime basketball coach, and kind of moved his way up. And it's been a godsend.
Yeah. A stabilization, I would think.
Stabilization, and what I realized in the search, is that his style very much meshed with mine, and his vision of putting students first meshed with mine, which was a little different from his predecessor.
Yeah.
And so I learned that through the process, and so
That's awesome.
It's been really great.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So talk a little about your role in the athletic conference you're in. I assume that the presidents function literally as a board of directors for the conference commissioner. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've been there about 18 months. I think we've had 2 meetings so far, another one next week at the conference. And we do function as a board of directors. The chairmanship of that rotates. We have an excellent executive director of the conference who really manages the day-to-day. And within our conference, the athletic director is also more involved in the day-to-day,
Right.
and kind of pull us in as they need. So I haven't had that much interaction with them other than phone conferences.
Yeah. Okay.
And no big controversial issues,
Okay.
in the conference. So.
And tell us the name of your conference.
It is SCIAC.
SCIAC, okay. And the range in terms of geography of schools in that conference goes from?
We're mostly within the LA area.
Okay. So you don't have to go to Oregon or?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
It's mostly, we do have a couple of sports like lacrosse. That because it's not a conference sport. There are a lot of schools in the conference. It's more of
Okay.
an East Coast.
Right.
And so we do travel more.
Okay.
And that's with men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse.
Okay. And have you had any interaction so far with NCAA governance?
Just in terms of the voting on things that have come up, but
Yeah.
not that much.
Not that much yet.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. Well, that's what you have representatives for, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Do you think you'll ever go to an NCAA convention?
Well, I'm going next week.
Oh, you're
in
going
Anaheim.
next week? Excellent.
I am going next week in Anaheim.
Okay.
In Anaheim, and as you know, it's very long. So,
It takes a lot of days. Yes.
Yeah, but at least it's local, and I'll go and I'll kind of get have a good eye and decide what to go to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. Tell us about the role that athletics really plays in enrollment and in campus life.
Whittier is interesting because, being a small traditional liberal arts college, being in Southern California, I have found, which was a nice surprise, that we have the typical Whittier student, when you meet them, they say, oh yeah, I'm editor of the newspaper. Oh, and I'm on the soccer team. Oh, and I'm a senator in student government. Oh, and I'm an RA in the dorm. So it's interesting because it really is so much of the life. Just geographically or physically in our campus, the athletics are uphill and the rest of the campus is downhill.
Interesting.
And so when I came in, one of the things when we did the search and we did some town halls is people talked about they felt there was a little bit of a us and them uphill, downhill.
Yeah.
And that was one reason why I really wanted Rock Carter in there to take the lead because him having been a student, he actually has his master's as well and he has taught students, and the faculty really respect him, as do the students and the administration. So with him there for the last year and a half, he's really kind of broken that mold, uphill, downhill, us versus them, and that's really helped a lot.
I think that's a really interesting observation because I have been on more campuses where athletics, the complex is sort of off, away. Either it's up or it's down, it's off to one side because of the land it just takes up. The fields take up the spaces, the buildings takes up, but it does create this divide.
Yeah.
So have you done any specific strategies has your athletic director done any specific strategies to try to bridge that divide?
Yeah, one of the things I'm really proud of him that he did, and he was interim in that, while we're doing the search. But he basically, we already had faculty athletic reps and things like that. But he also started inviting faculty to events, and to games, and doing receptions with faculty beforehand. At least for a lot of the major sports, at least once during whatever that season was.
Right.
And there's several faculty who told me, I've never been to a basketball game. And I think just doing that. One of the other things that I think is just great, and I think really matters, especially an institution like us, is Division III athletics. Small institutions, the biggest issue in higher ed right now is access to affordable education.
Yeah.
And let's face it, athletics at Division III helps us recruit men of color.
Yeah.
But we have equity issues in academics with men of color. We need to do a better job of retaining them. Our athletic director I also have a new VP, Dean of Students, who's a former athlete who played football at Brown.
Okay.
And actually worked at Arizona and Berkeley. Started his career as athletic advisor before Reed College. And they basically partnered and started doing orientation sessions for fall athletes and their families before school started in August. In particular for football, because a lot of the football players were showing up. It's 115 degrees in Whittier.
Yeah.
They're playing, our team has not done well for the last 20 years. And so then they get discouraged and they leave. And so I'm really proud that they're really thinking about student success for that population.
Right.
And how important athletics is in terms of student success.
That's a good point because there's a lot of outreach sometimes in bringing faculty, like you mentioned, to the games, which is wonderful. It's great. But we've really got to think about how to make that student comfortable on campus outside of their little cocoon, which is their athletic team.
Exactly.
And that's tough. That's tough to get students who may not be comfortable as a student yet. They're very comfortable in their athletic persona, but they don't really understand when can I approach the teacher? How much extra help can I ask for? Who do I go to if I've got a question I can't reach the faculty member? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. You reminded me of something that, that our athletic director and I talked about and that we've implemented. So Whittier College probably has the only person in the world on our faculty who has 2 Rose Bowl rings for football and 2 Grammys.
Wow. Multi-talented.
So Danny Lozano is a jazz musician, PhD in music, and he played football for USC. And Danny told me that as long as he's been on campus, 20 plus years, the football team never asked him to come talk to the football players. And here he is, a man of color, who has PhD, and he's on faculty.
Right.
And so that's another good thing that we've done. Is brought in role models to talk to students. My husband was a frustrated football player, and he's come and talked to the students. I already mentioned that our VP Dean of Students played football.
Right.
We also just hired a VP Enrollment Management who also played football in college as a man of color. So just looking within our own community.
Yes.
And trying to bring in people to be role models and talk to the players. It's been it's been fun.
It's early, but it'll be fun to follow up and see how well that's working with retention strategies.
It already
is. Okay, excellent.
Already is.
That's really great. And to see men of color with PhDs is huge.
Right.
Is absolutely huge.
Who played football?
Even better. Right. Exactly. How about campus life? I mean, what role does athletics play in just trying to create a esprit de corps and rah-rah campus spirit?
It's different because I went to UCLA, so it was very different from my experience. But then I did Ivy League for the next 2 degrees, which is almost the opposite.
Right.
I think because there's so many athletes and so many people, so many of the students know each other from so many different worlds. They really support each other.
Yeah.
But it's very different. It's it's not so much the hey, wear your pom-poms, cheer. It's I'm going to show up and be there for my friends. I'm going to sit with my friends and talk to them. So that part is really good to see. I actually have a niece who's a freshman.
Oh, no kidding.
Who's an athlete on my husband's side of the family, and she's a track athlete from a small town in Northern California. And it's so funny because her parents came down for homecoming weekend, and she's on the dance team, and the mom was like, don't they know she can fly? How come she can't do cheerleading? And that type of stuff is just not that big of a deal at Whittier in terms of ego.
Yeah, okay.
People just want to have fun and celebrate and support their friends.
That's cool. That's a nice environment. And I assume your campus is predominantly residential?
Historically is, but now we're about 50% commuter.
Okay.
50-50. Yeah.
All right.
So a lot of our commuters live in the general area or live at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got that. Tell us about your role of your trustees and the role of trustees in making any athletics decisions, whether it be hiring a coach or high-profile coach or adding or dropping sports, or what's your sense of their role in all of this?
They were involved in hiring an athletic director from the point of view that I had a former athlete trustee member who served on the committee.
Okay.
But they really don't get involved in the day-to-day. I think historically where they had gotten involved is there's a lot of fundraising for athletics.
Okay.
Our facilities are beautiful. In fact, I joked when I had my presidential visit, I called my husband and said, they're nicer than UCLA's and Harvard's facilities. I've never seen purple tennis courts.
Wow.
And purple football field.
Wow.
And purple athletic equipment, custom made. So the board of trustees was very involved in those sorts of things. They could be more involved in the future. I think if we ever did talk about dropping sports, we would of course include them.
Right.
In that decision. But they tend to let me manage the day-to-day.
So you're not like a typical board that might have 1 or 2 real booster fans on the trustees who really want to emphasize athletics. There's sort of a whole sense of we got to think what's best for the institution, not what's best for one particular program. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, but I think also being Division III
okay.
and historically just not being a powerhouse.
Okay.
Although we just won. Did you hear the water polo?
The water polo?
Championships?
I did see that. Yeah.
So it's our first team championship, national championship ever. But football has never, not since I guess the early days when Andy Reid coached.
Right, yeah,
Hasn't been a big powerhouse, and basketball's up and down. It tends to be stronger than that, but no, I mean they're supportive. But no, not like what I hear from a lot of institutions.
Yeah. Last question, and this is more kind of the landscape of college athletics today. I mean, we just heard about a unfortunate accusation of a hazing situation involving football at Penn State again this week.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And we hear a lot about concussions. We hear a lot about athlete health and wellness, safety. Number one, have you seen any of that yet in your role as president? Number two, do you have any thoughts about how you might address that with your student athletes and your coaches?
I actually walking in, there was an incident previously to my coming that I can't talk about a lot of details, but basically resulted in a large number of men of color leaving the school because they didn't think that the school handled it correctly.
Okay.
And so, I came in and with athletic director said, we got to handle this because this is unacceptable. Also we have to look at concussion protocol. We have to look at everything that we're doing. I think that's one good thing about having someone who's been there with the tenure, who understands and who's trusted very much by the students and the athletic staff, and frankly by the administration and the board.
Right.
It's also real easy for me because I just say it's not about athletics, it's about student success. And everything is about the students and getting them to graduate.
Yeah.
When I went around, my first year, I traveled 35,000 miles, and the biggest complaint I would hear from alumni athletes is football team's terrible. Football team's terrible. Hadn't won a football game in like 20 years or something like that. And I said, we're going to stop saying the football team's terrible, because here's these young men who are passionate about this sport, who aren't getting scholarships, who are coming to campus in that 115-degree heat. Let's start talking about how great it is that they're doing this, that they're passionate about, and how can we support them in terms of graduating.
Yeah.
Because I think that, of course people are going to drop out if the team's losing and they don't feel like they're welcomed, or, and I think that's one big reason why the retention just in a year, we only had 4 football players even on academic probation.
Wow.
This past year, same as lacrosse.
Yeah, good.
And we had a few people decide not to play, but we didn't have anyone leave because of that. And whereas the prior year is 30 players left.
It's a big change.
Yeah. And especially for a small college.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I don't talk about winning. I, of course, will celebrate our water polo team, but I don't talk about winning. I talk about, how you doing in school? What do you need?
Yeah, winning at life.
Winning at life, yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the wins will come.
I think if you create a good culture, many times that leads to success.
Yeah.
But it all depends on how you define success. If you're graduating great kids and they're having a great experience, in many ways that's success, right? Right. It doesn't have to be just wins and losses.
Right.
Any thoughts on the increasingly urgent call to pay attention to the demographic shift that's about to happen in higher ed with the fewer number of high school graduates and the worry that all schools are starting to feel that there's not going to be enough people out there to recruit? Any thoughts about that?
Thank you for asking me that.
Yes.
So before I got on the plane yesterday, I don't know if you saw the news, but we announced on Tuesday that Whittier College is not raising tuition for this year.
I did see that.
And it is totally about access to affordable education.
Yep.
We're very concerned. The first thing I did going to Whittier was I made my board and my cabinet read Breakpoint that talks about these issues from McGee's book, and it was very, very important. Whittier's been lucky in some ways because if you read that and you also read Nathan Grau's book,
yes,
of course most of the drops are going to be in the Northeast, the North, and the Midwest,
right?
And
most of the growth seems to be on the South and the Southwest, right? Yeah.
Whittier, before I came in, had a couple years of very strong growth, unexpected growth, and so we've been lucky from that point of view. But what we're seeing is the schools in the Midwest and in the East are coming to the Los Angeles area to recruit the students we get naturally.
Interesting.
And so we've kind of refocused. I think Whittier, rightfully so, was trying to be a national liberal arts school. I've come in and said that's great, but we're the only Hispanic serving liberal arts institution in the country.
Oh.
We have the most diverse population of any liberal arts school in the country, and our best academic success rates are with women in color, particularly Latinas, particularly in STEM fields.
Wow.
And being an institution in California, and we know that usually about 80% of students stay within 500 miles. The industry in California wants a pipeline of future employees who look like their customers.
Right.
And so,
Right.
so we've been embracing that, and we think it's very important because, like everyone else, we're challenged with tuition discounts,
Yeah.
and now there's more competition. Also, when I came in, I'd say, who's our competition? And we'd get, Claremont, Pomona, Occidental. So, no, I asked for the data. It's the California State University and a couple of the UCs, University of California campuses, which tells me it's a value decision.
Yeah.
And the state is putting a lot of money into those institutions right now.
Right.
And so we're working hard. We know affordability is an issue, big issue for our students, and so that's why we made that announcement to freeze tuition.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the College Access and Affordability Institute just came out with their annual survey on student debt. Public or private, it's over $30,000. So it's a big deal. It's a big number for many students to absorb once they graduate, families to absorb.
Yeah.
So it's a really important strategy.
One thing that's interesting is, so my office is right next to the business office. And so I can hear the line of students lining up, around November 15th because their bill is due and they can't register for classes.
Right.
Or, being a small campus, students talk to me. And, earlier when I was talking about students who do like 5 different things, I had one student come to me, she's working full time, plus she has 2 part-time jobs on campus, plus she's president of one of the clubs, plus she's running a big music festival in the spring.
Wow.
And she wanted to come talk to me because she wants to stay on the track team.
Wow.
And, one of my students says this in my office. I was talking to him day before yesterday, and he's a football player, and he's graduating. He said, he goes, well, I knew I was coming in I would get debt, and I didn't want my family to pay for it. He's a local kid.
Yeah.
He goes, I'm graduating $50,000 in debt.
Wow.
He said, but I knew what I was getting into.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, how did you know? And he talked about he was in a program in high school. So I think part of it also, we have to educate these populations.
Yeah.
That's what we find, and help them understand. And help them plan. But also, that's why we coupled our announcement with trying to raise a lot of money for scholarships.
Right.
Because that's the only way we're going to make it affordable.
That's absolutely the case for so many small privates. Well, Linda, thank you so
Thank
much
you so much
for taking the time
Thank
with
you.
me and
Thank
explaining your great new position.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us for another week of thinking about college athletics from the 30,000-foot perspective. In case this is the first time you are joining us, the podcast drops every Thursday morning. You can listen to previous guests and topics on 8 different podcasting platforms, including iTunes and Spotify. Each week, I will strive to give you a deeper understanding of the complexities of higher education and intercollegiate athletics in the 21st century. Please also join me on Forbes.com for additional content and extended analysis. Have a great week.